My name is Elena Vale. I was 31 years old when my family stood beneath crystal chandeliers, raised champagne glasses, and publicly reminded me that blood does not always mean belonging. The announcement happened on a warm April evening inside Vale Heritage Gallery, the place where I had spent most of my life working, without title, salary, or recognition. To everyone else, the gallery was elegant. White oak floors, museum lighting, original oils framed in gold leaf, quiet wealth hanging on every wall. To me, it was where I learned that some people can stand in the center of beauty while treating others like furniture. That night was meant to celebrate 35 years of my father, Victor Vale, running the gallery after inheriting it from his mother, Eleanor Vale. My grandmother had founded the place 47 years earlier. She had been a respected painter, with exact hands and kind eyes. She believed art should reveal truth. My father believed it should maximize revenue. Guess which philosophy paid for the chandeliers? More than 80 guests filled the rooms that evening. Collectors, donors, local journalists, Charleston society women who wore pearls like armor, men who spoke loudly about investments and softly about feelings. My mother, Mary Ann, floated through them all in silver silk, greeting each guest as though she personally owned culture itself. My older brother Damien stood near the entrance, in a navy suit, handsome and polished, shaking hands beside his wife Nora. He had the smile of a man who had never had to earn one thing privately. And me? I was in the back office 20 minutes before the speeches, reprinting place cards because one donor had changed tables, resetting the climate monitor in Gallery 3, and answering a frantic florist who wanted final payment. I was wearing black because black hid dust and made me invisible. I had chosen it carefully. When I stepped onto the main floor, my mother noticed immediately. "Elena," she said, scanning me top to bottom, "at least pin your hair back. You look tired." "I've been here since 7. She gave me a thin smile. "Then stand straighter." That was my mother's version of compassion. By 8:30, the string quartet began. Champagne moved through the rooms. My father tapped a spoon against a crystal glass. The room quieted instantly. Victor Vale knew how to command silence. He had practiced on employees and family for decades. "My friends," he began warmly, "thank you for helping us celebrate 35 extraordinary years." Applause. He placed one hand over my mother's. "My mother built this gallery with courage. I built it with vision. And now the next generation stands ready to carry it forward." His eyes moved toward Damien. More applause. I stood beside a marble column, holding a tray of empty flutes. Not one person looked at me. Then my father smiled wider. "And to celebrate this milestone, our family is leaving next week for a 14-day Mediterranean cruise." Excited murmurs spread instantly. Rome, Santorini, Athens, Dubrovnik, Nice, Barcelona. My mother laughed lightly. "The children are thrilled." Nora clapped. Damien lifted his glass like he had personally arranged Europe. For one reckless second, I let myself feel happy. I had not taken a real vacation in years. I worked mornings, evenings, weekends, openings, emergencies. I covered everything no one else noticed until it failed. Maybe this time, I would simply be included. I stepped forward slightly. "That sounds amazing," I said. "What date do we fly?" The room shifted. It was subtle. A pause too long. My father's expression cooled by 1 degree. My mother looked at her necklace. Damien smirked. Then Victor said, clearly enough for everyone to hear, "You're not coming, Elena." A hush fell over the gallery. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "I'm sorry?" "You'll stay here," he continued. "The gallery cannot be unattended for 2 weeks." My mother added smoothly, "Security can watch the doors. Only you know the systems." Someone near the bar coughed. Damien chuckled. "Besides," he said, "you hate crowds." I stared at him. "I've never said that." "You don't have to say things for them to be obvious." The next morning, Charleston woke to sunlight, humidity, and the first consequences my family could not charm away. I arrived at the gallery at 8:30. There were already 3 voicemails. One from a shipping coordinator, asking why the Morning Windows series had been removed from display. One from a donor requesting comment on rumors. One from my mother who had apparently discovered rage before breakfast. "Elena, call me immediately. What have you done now?" I deleted only one of them. Guess which? Inside the gallery, the emptiness on the east wall was startling. Where the series had hung for 5 years, there were now only clean rectangles of slightly brighter paint and proper spacing labels marked temporarily unavailable. Visitors noticed immediately. Good. By 9:15 my brother called through video. He was on the cruise deck, wearing sunglasses and resentment. Behind him, the sea was obscene in its beauty. "What is wrong with you?" he snapped. "Good morning, Damien. Put the paintings back. They're in secure storage. You had no authority." I almost smiled. "I created them." He removed his glasses. For the first time in years, I saw something raw in him. Not anger. "Seer, you think this makes you important?" "No," I said calmly. "It just makes me visible." He lowered his voice. "Do you understand what Dad built?" "Yes," I said, "mostly on unpaid labor." Then I ended the call. 2 longtime clients entered together. They were polite, wealthy, and professionally curious. I knew the type well. One glanced toward the missing wall. "Where is Damien's Dawn series?" "Under review," I said. The second woman tilted her head. "Review of what?" "Authorship." Neither spoke for 3 full seconds, then the first said quietly, "How interesting." They left without buying anything. By noon, my father called from what sounded like a marble lobby. He said, coldly, "You've become gossip." "No," I replied. "Your decisions did. You're humiliating this family." The sentence was so familiar it almost comforted me. In families like mine, exposure is always framed as betrayal. "I'm not speaking further without counsel," I said. "What counsel?" "Legal." Silence. Then, "You ungrateful girl." I ended the call before he could continue. At 12:40, I met with an attorney over video. Her name was Claire Donnelly. Sharp eyes, no nonsense. Mid-40s. She reviewed my files methodically. Time-stamped sketches, digital source files, email trails, purchase receipts, photographs of works in progress. When I finished, she leaned back. "You're in a stronger position than you think." "I don't want war." "Good," she said. "War is expensive. I want my name attached to my work, and I want to leave cleanly." She nodded. "Then we proceed with precision. Notice of disputed authorship on specified works. Request to preserve all relevant records. Formal communication that future use of my original works required written agreement. Professional. Measured. Unignorable." I approved all 3. At 3:12 p.m., the family group chat exploded. "Victor, what legal letter?" "Marianne, have you lost your mind?" "Damien, you are destroying decades of trust." "Nora, this is psychotic." I typed nothing. Then my phone buzzed privately. It was my mother. I answered against my better judgment. Her tone was trembling now. Not from sadness, from status panic. "Do you know what people are asking me?" "I can imagine. They're saying terrible things. About me, about us." There it was. Always the tree center, not harm. "Appearance. You should have thought about that years ago." She inhaled sharply. "We gave you everything." I looked around the office I had organized, the systems I had built, the salary I never received. "No," I said quietly. "You gave me chores." Then I hung up. At 4:30 another email arrived. From Aurora HR. Relocation packet attached. Temporary housing options. Immigration timeline. Start date proposals. I opened every document like sacred text. This was how real opportunities behaved. Not vague promises. Not someday. Not if you're good enough. Concrete dates. Clear terms. Respect. At 5, I locked the gallery early under policy allowance for operational review. Then, I did something I had imagined many times but never believed I'd do. I walked into my father's office. Mahogany desk, leather chair, walls lined with awards. Photographs of Damien shaking hands, my mother at galas, Victor with donors, none of me. I placed a sealed envelope in the center of the desk. Inside, my formal resignation, 30 days transition offer, remote only, systems manual, summary notice of departure date. I looked once around the room, then I removed one object from the bookshelf. A silver-framed photo of my grandmother Eleanor, standing beside me at age 12, both of us covered in paint. The only picture of me in the office. I slipped it into my bag. Mind. Outside, rain had begun. Warm southern rain, hitting pavement in soft bursts. I stood beneath the gallery awning and breathed deeper than I had in years. My phone rang again. "Damien." I let it go. Then a text came immediately after. "You think talent matters more than family, you'll learn." I replied with the calmest truth I knew. Family that requires theft to function is already broken. No response. That night, I booked a one-way flight to Vancouver. Departure, 12 days. They still had 8 days left on their cruise. 8 days of pretending paradise still belonged to them. They had no idea the person who kept their world stable had already stepped out of it. And when people like that lose control, they do not grieve quietly. They come home furious. They were supposed to return 5 days later. Instead, they came back the next afternoon. I knew before I saw them. At 10:06 a.m., the gallery's front security app alerted me that the main door had been unlocked with my father's executive keycard. At 10:07, my mother's perfume reached the office before she did. At 10:08, all 4 of them stood in the doorway, like weather systems that had chosen violence. Victor first, jaw set, carry-on luggage still in hand. Marianne behind him, in expensive travel linen, face pale with controlled fury. Damien in a wrinkled polo, eyes bloodshot from travel and ego injury. Nora filming something on her phone until my father snapped, "Put that away." No one greeted me. No one asked how I was. My father tossed a folder onto the desk. "What is this?" "My resignation. You sent legal threats to your own family." "I sent legal notices regarding my own work." His voice rose instantly. "Everything in this building belongs to Vale Heritage." I met his stare. My labor did not. My mother stepped forward. "Do you know what it was like, cutting short that trip? Rebooking 4 first-class tickets from Barcelona in peak season." The sentence was so absurd I nearly laughed. "That sounds difficult." She blinked, offended by my tone more than by reality. Damien slammed his palm onto the desk. "Enough games. Put the series back, retract the claims, apologize to Arthur, and we can move forward." "We." I had noticed that people who benefit most from injustice love the word "we." I folded my hands. "No." The room went still. Not silent, still. Even the air seemed to pause, which was always more dangerous. "You are emotional. You feel overlooked. Fine. We can discuss compensation." Compensation after years. As if he were offering a coupon. "You mean payment for work already taken?" "I mean generosity." "There it is," I said. His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "You still think dignity is something you grant?" My mother gave a sharp laugh. "Oh please, Elena, stop speaking like a podcast." Nora smirked. "You were never meant for the front of this business. You don't have the temperament." "Interesting," I said. "Because strangers just hired me for mine." That landed. Victor frowned. "What strangers?" I opened the printed offer letter and slid it across the desk. "Aurora Studios, Vancouver, Senior Visual Development Artist, Relocation Package, Start Date." Damien scanned it first, then read it again slower. Nora leaned in. My mother took the paper next, and looked offended by every line. My father read only the salary section. Then he set it down. "This is fantasy work. It's employment. It's cartoons. It's global media," I said, "with benefits." My mother crossed her arms. "So this is what this tantrum is about? You found some childish little job and now you think you're above us?" No matter how many times cruelty repeats, it still surprises me how lazy it can be. "This isn't about being above you," I said calmly. "It's about no longer living beneath you." Damien pointed toward the gallery floor. "You owe this family everything." "No," I replied. "I subsidize this family with unpaid expertise." Victor's face changed then. Not rage, calculation. He tried another tactic. "Elena." He rarely used my name softly. "We made mistakes. Fine. Stay 6 more months. Help stabilize things. We'll create a formal title for you." There it was. Too late dressed as opportunity. "What title?" He hesitated. "Director of Operations." My brother snapped. "Dad." Snapped. Victor silenced him with one glance. I almost admired the move. Offer the competent daughter structure only when collapse becomes expensive. "No." My mother threw up her hands. "What more do you want?" I looked to her. The woman who had once asked me to iron table linens at midnight before donor dinners, while calling me lucky to be included. I wanted respect when it was cheap. No one spoke. Then Nora, unable to help herself, muttered, "This is embarrassing." "For whom?" She looked away first. My father straightened. "If you walk out now, don't expect to come back. There are threats that lose power the moment they're spoken too late. I'm leaving in 12 days. His eyes flicked to the resignation envelope. "You booked it already?" "Yes." My mother's voice cracked for the first time. "You'd leave your family for strangers?" I answered honestly. "I'd leave strangers who called themselves family for people who value my work." That one hit hardest. Because it was true. Damien moved toward the door. pacing once then turned sharply. You think they care about you? No, I said. I think they hired me. That's already healthier. Victor exhaled through his nose and looked suddenly older. Then he said the thing he should have said years earlier. What do you need from me? Not what do you need. What do you need from me? As if all roads still led through him. The word changed the room more than shouting ever could. My mother sat down slowly in the visitor chair. My brother stopped pacing. Even Nora lowered her phone. Nothing. No approval. No title. No inheritance. No apology package. No negotiated permission. My father looked around the office as though seeing it clearly for the first time. The system's binders labeled in my handwriting. The schedules. The donor records. The maintenance logs. The machine. And perhaps, finally, who had been running it. He picked up the silver frame that used to sit on his shelf. Empty space where the photo had been. When did you take this? Yesterday. That photo belonged here. No, I said quietly. She belonged to me. I met my grandmother. He knew it. For a long time no one moved. Then, Victor took the offer letter, straightened it carefully, and placed it back on my desk. When do you leave? 12 days. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. My mother rose immediately. Victor? He kept walking. Damien followed in disbelief. Nora trailed behind them. Only my mother lingered. At the threshold she said without facing me. You could have had everything here. I answered the last lie of my old life. No. I could have continued giving everything here. She left. The gallery doors closed. Silence returned. I sat down slowly, hands trembling only now that it was over. Then my inbox chimed. Arthur Langford, subject, independent representation. I opened it. If you're serious about showing work under your own name, I'd like to discuss first rights. Also, congratulations on leaving. Regards, Arthur. I laughed out loud, then cried once. Then got back to work. Because I had 12 days left in one life. And the next one was already waiting. The strange thing about leaving a broken system is this. It often collapses before you're even gone. For years my family believed I was replaceable because they had never tried replacing me. Now they did. And it was expensive. 2 days after they returned, I came in to find 3 temporary staff members wandering the front hall like tourists trapped inside a museum. One was trying to reboot the alarm panel with the emergency fire code. Another had printed donor labels upside down. The third had hung a 19th century landscape in direct sunlight. I moved faster than thought. No. All 3 froze. I corrected the placement, reset the panel, and removed the labels. One young woman looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, Mr. Vale said this was all straightforward. I almost smiled. Mr. Vale says many things. By 10:30, my father arrived. He stopped short when he saw me instructing the staff. I thought you were done helping. I'm done saving you, I said. This is for the painting. I gestured toward the landscape. UV damage did not care about family conflict. He said nothing. That was becoming common. By noon, 2 collectors canceled private appointments. One requested clarity regarding authorship concerns. Another asked whether future works credited to Damien had independent verification. My brother took that personally, which was useful, because for once he was being asked questions instead of avoiding them. At 1:15, I passed his office and heard shouting. I'm not doing a forensic breakdown of brushwork for some hedge fund idiot. Pause, then louder, because it's insulting. I kept walking. Truth often feels insulting to people who rely on fiction. That afternoon, a local arts blogger posted an article. Who really painted morning windows? Nothing defamatory. Just timelines. Public records. Photos from old events, showing me in the background carrying wet canvases. Archived interviews where Damien gave contradictory stories about inspiration. The comments were brutal. Artists know artists. She did the work. This happens constantly to women in family businesses. Pay the sister. My mother called me at 3:40. I considered ignoring it. Then answered. Do you see what's happening online? Yes. It's humiliating. It's informative. Can't you stop these people? Did I start them? This all began when you became vindictive. I looked around the archive room, where I was packing my own materials into labeled boxes. No, I said. It began when you confused my silence for consent. She went quiet. Then softer. You used to be so easy. There are sentences that explain decades. I used to be trapped. I ended the call. That evening, Aurora sent relocation dates, move-in assistance, studio orientation, benefits activation, a map of Vancouver neighborhoods. I zoomed in on the harbor like it was a future I could physically touch. Then another email arrived. From Arthur Langford. Elena, I'd like to purchase 3 original works from your private collection if available. Additionally, I know 2 curators interested in emerging independent voices. Call me when ready. Arthur. 3 original works. My work. Not disputed, not borrowed, not hidden, mine. The next morning, chaos matured. The payment system crashed because no one knew the secondary admin password. The florist wasn't paid. A donor arrived to a locked private room because Damien had double-booked it for a podcast interview. Nora tried to smooth things over by offering champagne at 11 a.m. It did not help. At lunch, my father knocked on the archive room door, actually knocked. I almost invited witnesses. He stood there holding 2 coffees. One black, mine. How did you know? You've taken it that way for 10 years. He set it down awkwardly. Then looked around the room. My labeled boxes, my rolled canvases, my grandmother's photo wrapped in towels. You really are leaving? Yes. He nodded once. I thought you were making a point. I am. He almost smiled at that. Then he sat across from me. Older than I remembered. When my mother ran this place, he said quietly. She trusted instinct too much. Brilliant artists, terrible business decisions. We nearly lost everything twice. I listened. When I took over, I swore sentiment would never sink us again. So you chose marketability over honesty? I chose survival. No, I said gently. You chose control. That landed. He looked down at the coffee. I thought Damien could carry the public side. I thought you preferred being behind scenes. Did you ever ask? He didn't answer. Because he hadn't. He stood after a long silence. Arthur wants to meet next week. He says only if you attend. Victor's jaw tightened. Then, with visible effort, you should. There it was, not an apology, but the first recommendation of my future over his convenience. Small, late, real. When he left, I sat very still. Healing does not always begin with tears. Sometimes it begins with a man who built his life on certainty, finally sounding unsure. That night Damien cornered me by the loading dock. He smelled like expensive cologne and panic. You enjoying this? No. Liar. I'm relieved. Different emotion. You think one studio job makes you special? No. But it proves I was never ordinary. He laughed bitterly. They'll replace you in a year. Maybe, I said. But at least they'll have to hire someone. He stared. Because he finally understood the deepest insult. At Aurora, my labor had value. At home, it had been expected. I walked past him. 3 days remained until my flight. And the family empire was learning what invisible people cost when they leave. 3 days before my flight to Vancouver, my father asked me to dinner. Not summoned. Asked. The message arrived by text at 4:12 p.m. Victor, would you have dinner with me tonight? Just us. No mention of the gallery. No mention of urgent. No command language. I stared at it longer than necessary. Then replied. Me. 1 hour. Public place. He answered almost immediately. Victor, we met at a quiet seafood restaurant on the Charleston Harbor, where my parents usually entertain donors. I had been there many times, never as a guest. Usually I was the person who called ahead, confirmed allergies, adjusted reservations, and quietly disappeared before anyone arrived. This time the host said, Ms. Vale, your table is ready. Small things can feel revolutionary. My father stood when I approached. He looked tired. Not dramatically ruined, not movie scene broken. Just older, as though the last week had introduced him to mirrors. He pulled out my chair. I nearly told him not to perform. Then I realized maybe it wasn't performance. Maybe he simply had no other language for trying. We ordered. For several minutes we discussed neutral things. Weather, traffic, the bridge repairs. People often do that when they are standing at the edge of something emotional. They point at scenery. Finally, he folded his napkin and said, I handled your grandmother badly. Not you, your grandmother. Interesting place to start. How? I turned her life's work into numbers. I waited. She would have hated some of what I did. Most of it, I said. A sad smile touched his mouth. Yes. Most. The waiter brought water. Neither of us touched it. He continued. When she was dying, she told me two things. I felt my chest tighten. What? She said the gallery would survive without prestige. He paused. And she said talent in this family had skipped me. I looked at him carefully. She meant me. Silence settled between us, like weather no one could outrun. Then he said the sentence I had wanted for years and no longer needed. I should have protected your name. I did not cry. Healing is often quieter than movies teach us. Sometimes it sounds like your heartbeat slowing. You used it. I said. Yes. You gave my work away. Yes. You watched them diminish me. His eyes dropped. Yes. There are moments when honesty itself feels like labor. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Dessert menus arrived and were removed untouched. Then my father reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. Inside, amended gallery records acknowledging disputed attribution on Morning Window's proposal for retrospective correction, crediting collaborative authorship, pending legal review, transfer papers offering me minority ownership shares in Vale Heritage Gallery. I looked through every page. Expensive lawyers. Strategic remorse. What is this? My attempt to make things right. No, I said softly. This is your attempt to keep me connected. He flinched because it was true. You belong there. I belonged there when it cost you nothing. He leaned forward. Elena, the gallery can still be yours one day. I closed the folder. That building was never the prize. He stared at me. Then asked almost helplessly. What was? To be loved without usefulness. He closed his eyes. For a moment he looked exactly like a son who had disappointed his own mother. Then he nodded once. I don't know if I know how to do that. I know. The bill arrived. He reached for it automatically. I placed my card down first. He looked startled. I invited you. And I'm paying. Elena, I need you to understand something. I held his gaze. You can't buy back the years by covering dinner. The waiter quietly took my card. My father said nothing. Outside, harbor lights shimmered on black water. We stood beside the valet stand like strangers linked by resemblance. I'm proud of you, he said. It was sincere, and tragically late. Thank you. He seemed to wait for something more. Forgiveness, perhaps. Reversal, a movie ending. Instead I said, my flight is at 9:40 Friday. He nodded. I know. Of course he did. He always knew logistics. Emotion had been the missing file. The next morning, the local paper published a short business note. Vale Heritage announces internal attribution review. My brother called it betrayal. My mother called it humiliation. I called it documentation. Arthur Langford called it noon. I hear your father is learning nouns like accountability. I laughed. He's trying. Do you need him to succeed? No. Excellent answer. Then Arthur asked if I would meet two curators in Vancouver after I settled in. Doors were opening so quickly now, I had to stop measuring life by old ceilings. That afternoon I packed the final box from the archive room. Inside were my sketchbooks, grandmother Eleanor's letters, the old photo from Victor's office, one brass placard reading Damien Vale from Morning Windows number 7. I had kept it for a reason I only now understood. Not bitterness. Evidence of transformation. Once another name had covered mine, now it was only an artifact. At 6:30 p.m., my mother appeared in the archive doorway. No perfume this time, no pearls, just fatigue. She looked around at the emptiness. You really took everything. No, I said, only what was mine. She opened her mouth, closed it, then asked, in a smaller voice than I had ever heard from her. Did we truly make you that unhappy? I considered lying kindly. Then chose mercy through truth. You made me invisible. She leaned against the frame as though suddenly tired in her bones. I thought you liked helping. No, I said gently. You liked that I never refused. Tears gathered in her eyes. They changed nothing. But they were real. She nodded once and walked away. The next day was my last in Charleston. And for the first time in my life, departure felt less like loss than release. My last morning in Charleston began before sunrise. The apartment was almost empty. 2 suitcases by the door. 1 carry-on packed with sketchbooks, contracts, and the old photograph of my grandmother Eleanor, laughing with paint on her cheek. The walls looked larger, without hesitation, inside them. I made coffee in the chipped mug I had owned since college. and stood by the kitchen window while the city slowly brightened. For years I had believed endings would feel dramatic. Doors slamming, speech-worthy closure, some grand emotional weather. Instead, this one felt quiet. Like finally setting down something heavy you had mistaken for part of your body. At 7:30, I drove to the gallery one last time. The streets were still mostly empty. Charleston moved softly at that hour, as if the city preferred honesty before commerce woke. I unlocked the side entrance using the employee code I had programmed myself years earlier. Inside, the building was dim and cool. No quartet, no donors, no perfume, no performance. Just polished floors, framed silence, and the low hum of machines I no longer needed to protect. I walked room by room. Gallery 1. Landscapes in gold frames my father loved because they matched wealthy dining rooms. Gallery 2. The east wall where morning windows had once hung. Still bare. I had expected triumph seeing it empty. What I felt instead was tenderness for the younger version of me, who had stood beneath those paintings, pretending not to mind. Gallery 3. Contemporary works no one understood, but everyone praised, because pricing implied intelligence. Then I entered the restoration room and back. My grandmother's old work table still stood against the far wall. Scarred wood, paint marks embedded like memory. Someone had polished it badly years ago, trying to erase use. I set my hand on the surface. "I'm going," I whispered. I did not know whether I meant Vancouver or finally into myself. When I returned to the front hall, my father was standing there. He held 2 paper cups of coffee. He had become fond of arriving with gestures too late. "I thought you might come. I had keys." He handed me 1 cup. Black. Still remembered. We stood side by side facing the entrance doors, where morning light spread across the floor. "I accepted your transfer papers back," he said. "I know. You didn't sign." "No," he nodded. I wasn't sure if refusing was punishment. It was freedom. Then reached into his coat pocket and handed me something wrapped in tissue. Inside was a brass plate, newly engraved. I stared at it. Eleanor Studio. Reopening soon. Below in smaller letters. Curated in honor of Eleanor Vale. I looked at him. "You're restoring her room?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I spent 20 years renovating her out of the building." His voice was rough. "And because some names should come back." I ran my thumb across the letters. It was a good gesture. Maybe even a brave one. But bravery after damage remains complicated. "Thank you," I said. He exhaled, relieved by even that. Then after a pause. "I'd like to visit Vancouver sometime." "You can." Hope flashed across his face. "As a guest." He smiled sadly. "Fair." My mother arrived 10 minutes later. No makeup. Hair pinned quickly. She carried a bakery box. I brought scones for the flight. The old version of me would have cried at crumbs mistaken for intimacy. The new version simply accepted the box. "Thank you." She looked around the hall. "It feels empty already." "No," I said gently. "It feels honest." She winced, but nodded. Then Damien entered. Late, of course. No apology visible anywhere on him. He looked at the luggage by the desk. "So this is really happening?" "Yes." He shifted his weight. "You know they'll work you to death there. Then they'll have to pay overtime." That nearly made my father laugh. Damien glanced at the bare wall in Gallery 2. "I could have made that series bigger." "You already did," I said, "with my help." He looked away first, then muttered, "Good luck." For Damien that was near poetry. I respected the consistency. At 8:40, my ride to the airport arrived. I rolled my suitcase to the door. My mother hugged me awkwardly, as though learning a language through embarrassment. My father kissed my forehead once. A gesture from childhood so old, it startled me. Damien gave a stiff nod. Then I stepped outside. The morning air was cool and bright. Halfway to the car, I turned back. They were all standing beneath the gallery sign, Vale Heritage Gallery 3. People who had once seemed as permanent as architecture, now simply human, flawed, late, real. I raised one hand. Then got in the car. Vancouver smelled like rain and possibility. Aurora Studios placed me in temporary housing overlooking water and steel bridges. The office itself felt like another species of workplace. People introduced themselves by first names. Ideas were debated, not inherited. When I spoke in meetings, people wrote things down. The first time that happened, I nearly forgot what I was saying. My team built worlds for animated films, cities suspended in clouds, forests grown through ruins, homesickness translated into color. I worked harder than I ever had. But exhaustion chosen is different from exhaustion assigned. 3 months later, Arthur Langford purchased 2 originals from my private collection. 6 months later, a small Vancouver arts magazine featured my studio. The artist who finally signed her own work. 1 year later, Aurora promoted me to lead visual development artist on a feature film. And in the spring after that, I held my first solo exhibition. Title: The Name on the Wall. Rooms full of paintings about memory, labor, inheritance, and light. At the entrance, a line stretched down the block. Near the back, unnoticed by most, stood my father, older, quieter, looking at a painting of an empty chair facing dawn. He did not approach me. He did not make it about himself. He simply stood there with tears in his eyes and let the work speak where he once had not. My mother sent flowers. Damien sent nothing, which oddly enough felt accurate. At closing time, after the last guest left, I walked alone through the gallery. My gallery. On the final wall hung the title piece, a brass plate painted into the canvas, scratched and shining. It bore only 2 words. Elena Vale. I stood before it for a long time. Then I thought of my grandmother saying, "One day, your name will belong on these walls." She had been right. Not because anyone gave it back, because I took it with me. And that is the truth people misunderstand about revenge. The deepest kind is not destruction. It is departure. It is building a life so fully your own, that those who diminished you must speak your name with respect. Or not at all. There are moments humiliation arrives like thunder. This was not one of them. This was slower. This was a room full of people, deciding not to help. A woman in emerald silk looked away. A collector I had assisted for years suddenly found great interest in his champagne. A young reporter lowered her eyes. No one interrupted. No one said, "Surely she should come too." My father lifted his glass again. "Elena understands sacrifice. She always has." Laughed. I smiled because I had trained that reflex for years. "Of course," I said softly. "Someone has to stay." My mother relaxed instantly. There she is. There she is. Not my daughter, not Elena, not talented, exhausted, loyal, necessary Elena. There she is, the useful version. The one who made everyone else's lives run smoothly. The quartet resumed. Conversations restarted. The machine corrected itself. I walked calmly to the back office, closed the door, and stood in the dark. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the desk. On the wall hung an old black and white photo of my grandmother Eleanor, standing in the unfinished gallery, during construction. Paint on her jeans, hair tied back, smiling directly at the camera. When I was 10, she had taken charcoal from my fingers and said, "One day, your name will belong on these walls." After she died, no one ever repeated anything so generous. I sank into the office chair. My phone buzzed. I merely ignored it. Then I saw the sender. Aurora Studios, Vancouver. Subject line: Final interview invitation. For 3 years, I had secretly submitted concept art, environments, story worlds, and visual development pieces to studios all over North America. Most never replied. Some sent polite rejection templates. Aurora was different. They had requested samples twice already. Now they wanted a final interview. I read the email 3 times. Then I heard laughter from the main gallery floor. My family, celebrating a trip they had publicly excluded me from. I looked again at the invitation. Interview slots available next Thursday. The same day, they would be somewhere near Rome, posting photographs of themselves under Mediterranean light. I should tell them, I thought. I should tell them I had opportunities, that I had value beyond keycards and inventory spreadsheets. But another voice, older and wiser, answered inside me. No. Let them underestimate you one last time. I wiped my eyes, stood, and returned to the party. For the next 2 hours, I replenished glasses, coordinated dessert service, fixed a lighting issue in Gallery 2, and arranged transportation for guests too drunk to drive. At 11:15, my father clasped my shoulder as the last donors departed. "Good work tonight. Good work." As if I were hired help. My mother kissed the air beside my cheek. "We need to review everything you'll handle while we're gone." Damien winked. "Try not to miss us." I looked at each of them in turn. Then I said the truest thing I had spoken in years. "I won't." That night, When the gallery was empty and the chandeliers dimmed, I stood alone beneath my grandmother's name, carved into brass near the entrance. Founded by Elena Vale. I touched the letters lightly. Then I opened my phone and accepted the interview. People always ask the wrong question when they hear a story like mine. Why did you stay? They ask it with impatience, as if leaving is a door everyone notices at the same time. But some doors are painted to look like walls. I did not stay because I lacked intelligence. I stayed because loyalty can be weaponized. I stayed because hope can become a trap. And because family knows exactly which version of love will keep you in place. My grandmother Eleanor died when I was 23. Until then, the gallery had still felt partially human. She corrected my sketch lines with tenderness. She let me work beside her in the restoration room. She taught me to mix pigments, stretch canvas, and steady shadows the way some people study scripture. Light tells the truth, she used to say. People lie. Light rarely does. When she became ill, I spent nights beside her hospital bed, drawing buildings from memory, while machines breathed in measured rhythm. 3 days before she passed, she squeezed my wrist and whispered, "Don't disappear in this family." I promised her I wouldn't. Then I did exactly that. After the funeral, my father took control completely. He modernized pricing, rebranded rooms, courted wealthier buyers, cut community classes, and converted my grandmother's studio into a private collector lounge with imported whiskey and leather chairs. He called it progress. I called it embalming. Still, I stayed. At first because I thought someone should protect what remained of her legacy. Then because my father kept dangling approval, like a medal just out of reach. Elena, excellent inventory system. Elena, no one handles clients as calmly as you. Elena, once things stabilize, we'll discuss your future here. That conversation never came. Then years passed, and practical fear took over. Rent was expensive. My freelance commissions were inconsistent. The gallery needed me enough to exploit me, but never enough to pay me fairly. So, I became the invisible infrastructure of an institution with my family's name on the door. Every morning I arrived before 9. I calibrated humidity sensors for older canvases. I updated provenance files. I scheduled restorers. I handled insurance forms. I soothed donors. I fixed printers. I cleaned wine stains before events. I remembered birthdays, allergies, preferred lighting levels, and which collectors wanted to be greeted loudly versus discreetly. My brother Damien did none of these things. He arrived around 11:30 most days, in tailored jackets and expensive sneakers. He shook hands. He spoke about vision. He posted photographs beside art he had never touched. And everyone praised his leadership. My mother loved introducing him. Our son has such instincts. Like inheriting a functioning machine and calling yourself an engineer. When guests asked what I did, she would smile vaguely. Elena helps us tremendously. Helps us. As if I occasionally passed through with cookies. By 26, I had stopped expecting fairness. Then came Morning Windows. That series changed everything and nothing. It started after I found an old notebook of my grandmother's filled with studies of dawn light, entering ordinary rooms, hallways, unmade beds, simple spaces transformed by first light. I became obsessed. For 4 months I painted before sunrise in a rented attic studio no one knew I still kept. 12 pieces, muted interiors, luminous windows, loneliness softened by morning. When I showed them privately to my father, he stared longer than usual. "These are strong," he said. It was the highest praise he had ever given me. Then he asked to display them in the gallery's spring show. I thought this was it. My moment. The opening night invitations went out 2 weeks later. I unfolded one in the mailroom. Morning Windows, new works by Damien Vale. I remember the exact sensation. Not heartbreak. Vacancy. I confronted my father in his office. "You used my work." He didn't even look ashamed. "I positioned your work. It has his name. It has a future," he replied. "You are talented, Elena. Damien is marketable." I could barely breathe. "You stole from me. I built this institution. I know what sells. Don't confuse authorship with opportunity." Then he added the sentence that explained my entire family. "You take things too personally." Damien sold 6 pieces that season. Local magazines called him Charleston's rising young artist. He accepted compliments over champagne, while I adjusted spotlights. I told myself I would leave after that. Instead, I stayed another 5 years, because pain repeated long enough starts to feel like weather. Because I still heard my grandmother's voice in the halls, because I had begun building something private. At night, after everyone went home, I created worlds no one in Charleston had ever seen. Floating cities, ruined palaces reclaimed by vines, deserts of mirrored stone, libraries carved into cliffs. I studied digital painting online, learned software through free tutorials, sent portfolios under my own name to studios in Canada, California, Seattle. Every rejection sharpened me. Every silence taught endurance. No one in my family knew. To them, I went home tired. To myself, I was becoming dangerous. The morning after the cruise announcement, my mother summoned me to the dining room with 3 legal pads and a planner. She wore linen and authority. "We need to review responsibilities while we're away." She listed them casually: daily opening procedures, climate checks, payroll approvals, private showing for a Chicago collector, vet medicine for her Persian cat, weekly floral refresh, trash collection timing. She spoke as though assigning a house sitter. I listened quietly. Then, she handed me a folder. "Everything you need." I opened it. No thank you note, no travel gift, no apology, just schedules. My brother walked in halfway through. "Make sure my office fern gets sunlight," he said, pouring coffee. "You have an office fern. Why are you always so negative?" My mother snapped her planner shut. "Elena, please don't start things this week." Start things. I had been publicly excluded and privately loaded with labor, but I was the one who might start things. I almost laughed. Instead, I took the folder and stood. "When do you leave?" "Tuesday," she said. "Good," I replied. "I have plans Thursday." She looked confused. I let her. And for the first time in years, I walked out before being dismissed. My family left for Europe on a bright Tuesday morning with 4 matching suitcases, coordinated airport outfits, and the kind of excitement people wear when they believe comfort is evidence of character. I watched from the gallery office security monitor. My mother locked the front door behind them, then handed me the emergency keys through the mail slot, as though passing food to a prisoner. "Don't forget Arthur Langford arrives Friday," she called. Then, she smiled, the way people smile when they mistake dependence for loyalty. The SUV pulled away. And just like that, the Vale family began 14 days of ocean views, private dining, and curated happiness. I began work. By 9:30 I had reopened the gallery, reset the alarm system, responded to 6 emails, and corrected a shipment error involving 2 lithographs headed for Savannah. At 10:15, my mother posted the first cruise photo. All 4 of them, on the embarkation deck in Rome. Champagne flutes raised. Caption: "Family is everything." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I laughed so suddenly I startled myself. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. They truly believed the lie they performed. I turned my phone face down and opened my laptop. Aurora Studios had sent calendar options for the final interview. Thursday, 2:00 p.m. Eastern. I accepted immediately. Then, I spent the next 2 days doing something I should have done years earlier. I gathered evidence. Not revenge evidence. Truth evidence. Sketchbooks. Time-stamped digital files. Layered PSD originals. Emails where I had suggested compositional changes, later credited to Damien. Invoices for supplies purchased with my card for works later sold under his name. Photographs of half-finished canvases in my attic studio. I was not building a case to destroy them, I was building a record so they could never erase me again. That Wednesday night, while the cruise docked near Naples, my brother posted a photo from a private tasting room. He stood beside a sommelier in rolled sleeves. Caption: "Business ideas never stop, even at sea." I almost admired the consistency. He could monetize oxygen. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and walked through the silent gallery. Without guests, without family, without performance, the building felt different. It felt tired. I entered Gallery 2, where morning windows still occupied the east wall. 4 remaining pieces unsold. I stood before the 7th painting in the series. A narrow room. Wooden chair angled toward light. Dust visible in the beam. My favorite. My grandmother's notebook had inspired it. My own grief had completed it. The placard beneath read, "Damien Vale, oil on canvas." I stared until the letters blurred. Then I did something small and irreversible. Just slipped it free and placed it in my pocket. No scene, no speech, no witness. Only silence. At 1:30 I logged into the Aurora interview 15 minutes early. My apartment background had been replaced with the gallery archive room wall. Neutral, clean, professional. 3 faces appeared. 2 producers, 1 creative director. Julian Mercer. Silver hair at the temples, alert eyes. No wasted gestures. He thanked me for my time, then began without theater. We've reviewed your environment work, your architectural storytelling, and your atmospheric studies. I nodded. We're interested in how you think. For the next 40 minutes, they asked about composition, emotional geometry, color narrative, memory and world building, and how loneliness can be designed into space. No one in my family had ever asked how I thought, only what I could do. Then Julian leaned forward. Why has someone with this level of skill remained largely unseen? There it was, the question beneath all questions. I could have lied politely. I could have said timing, market conditions, confidence. Instead I said, I spent years in an environment where usefulness was rewarded more than voice. No one interrupted. I continued. When you become valuable in service, people stop imagining you as anything else. Julian's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not pity, recognition. Then he said, good answer. The final portion was live. They gave me a prompt. Design a city built by people who lost their homeland but kept their memories. 45 minutes. My pulse surged. When the call closed, I sat motionless in the archive room with tears gathering before I felt them form. Someone had seen me, professionally, cleanly, without history, without hierarchy, without asking me to apologize first. That evening, while the cruise approached Santorini, my mother called. I let it ring twice before answering. Elena, Arthur Langford confirmed tomorrow at 11. Please wear something structured. Hello to you too. I looked at the removed placard on my desk. What does he want exactly? Potential licensing discussion regarding morning windows. Of course. My stomach tightened. Will Damien attend virtually? He'll join if necessary. But you know the details better than anyone, so just keep things moving. There it was again. Usefulness. Even now, my mother lowered her voice. And Elena? Yes. Please remember whose family name is on those walls. I remained still for a long time. Then I opened my desk drawer. Inside lay a thin envelope I had kept for years. The original postcard my grandmother mailed me when I was 19 and studying art part-time. On the back she had written, never confuse silence with agreement. I placed the card beside the missing placard. Tomorrow, a powerful man would arrive to discuss paintings credited to my brother, but born from my hands. For years I had believed truth needed permission, now I wasn't so sure. At 10 the next morning, I adjusted the lights in gallery 2. At 10:45, I heard the front door open. And when I looked up, Arthur Langford had already stopped in front of my painting. He did not turn around. He simply asked, tell me why the chair is empty. And for the first time in years, I was ready to answer. Arthur Langford did not look like the kind of man who moved markets. He wore no visible luxury labels, no oversized watch, no performative confidence. Just a navy blazer, gray trousers, and a pair of reading glasses he held loosely in one hand. He stood in front of Morning Windows number 7, studying the empty chair. The gallery was silent except for the low hum of climate control. I walked toward him carefully. Good morning, Mr. Langford. He nodded once, but kept looking at the painting. Tell me why the chair is empty. No greeting, no small talk. Just the question. I could have given him the public answer Damien had used in interviews. A meditation on absence. That phrase had appeared in 2 magazines and 1 podcast. Instead, I told the truth. Because someone left before sunrise, I said. And the room still remembers them. Arthur turned slowly, his eyes sharpened behind the glasses. That's not the statement listed in Damien Vale's catalog notes. No, I said, it isn't. He studied me for several seconds. Then he moved to the next painting. A narrow kitchen lit by pale gold dawn. A mug on the counter. 1 cabinet door slightly open. And this one? The cabinet was left open because grief makes people forget small things. He looked back at me. You speak as if you painted them. I held his gaze. I did. The words landed quietly. No thunder. No shattered glass. Just truth entering a room built to exclude it. Arthur said nothing for so long that I heard my own pulse. Then he gestured toward the private office. Let's sit. Inside, I offered coffee. He declined. He placed a leather notebook on the table and opened it. I've been considering a substantial licensing partnership around this series, he said. Hospitality spaces. Limited prints. International rights. I said nothing. I assumed Damien Vale was the creator. He was the signature. That almost made him smile. Do you have proof? Years earlier that question would have broken me. Now it steadied me. Yes. I brought in 2 archive boxes in my laptop. Inside the boxes, original charcoal studies, composition thumbnails, pigment tests dated 4 years earlier, progress photographs taken in my attic studio, notebooks referencing my grandmother Eleanor's dawn studies. Time-stamped layered files, emails where I sent crop revisions, later presented as Damien's decisions. Invoice receipts for materials purchased on my card. Arthur reviewed everything slowly. No drama, no outrage, just precision. At one point he paused over a photograph of me, standing beside 3 unfinished canvases. My hair tied back, paint on my jawline, looking exhausted and alive. When was this taken? 5 years ago. Who took it? My grandmother. He nodded once. Then he closed the final folder. I believe you. I had imagined many outcomes: suspicion, dismissal, legal caution. I had not prepared for belief. Arthur removed his glasses and polished them with a cloth. This puts me in an awkward position, professionally. I understand. No, he said calmly. I don't think you do. He replaced the glasses. I was prepared to invest heavily in a family brand built partly on fraud. The word hung between us. Fraud. My family would have called it strategy. Arthur stood. All negotiations are paused, pending authorship review. He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the table. If you decide to represent your own work independently, call me. I stared at the card. He moved toward the door, then stopped. One more question. Yes. Why stay so long? There it was again. The question people ask after damage, as though survival should have looked cleaner. I answered honestly. Because when exploitation arrives through family, it often introduces itself as duty. Arthur's expression softened. That, he said quietly, is more valuable than the paintings. Then he left. At 12:17 p.m., my father called. I knew Arthur had reached him. I answered on the second ring. What did you do? No hello. No pause. Just accusation. I told the truth. You sabotaged a 7-figure opportunity. You mean I interrupted it? His breathing sharpened. You had no right. I almost laughed. No right? They were my paintings. There are sentences that reveal a person completely. That was one of them. Not daughter's work. Not family mistake. Assets. I'm done speaking if that's how you see me. Elena, I ended the call. 2 minutes later, Damien called. Then my mother. Then Nora. Then all 4 in sequence, like weather fronts. I ignored them. At 1:05 p.m., my phone buzzed with a family group message. Victor, we need immediate damage control. Marianne, answer your phone. Damien, you're being emotional and reckless. Nora, this affects all of us. I typed once. It affected me first. Then, I muted the thread. Something unexpected happened. The gallery felt lighter. No one had been fired. No contract signed. No grand speech delivered. And yet the air itself had changed. Because a lie had been forced to carry its own weight for the first time. I walked into Gallery 2 and stood again before Morning Windows number 7. The empty chair looked different now. Less lonely. I took out the old placard with Damien's name. Then I printed a temporary replacement on archival cardstock. No title change. No scene. Just one line. Artist attribution under review. I placed it beneath the frame. Then I stepped back. Perfect. At 3:40 p.m., my inbox chimed. From Julian Mercer, Aurora Studios. Subject, follow-up. My hands shook as I opened it. Elena, thank you for today's conversation. The team was deeply impressed by both your artistic instincts and your clarity of thought. We'd like to move quickly. Are you available for a brief call tomorrow morning? Julian Mercer. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Move quickly. The phrase felt dangerous. Hope always had. Outside, tourists drifted past the windows, unaware that inside the gallery, an old system had begun to crack. My family was somewhere near Santorini by then. Like reposting sunset photographs. likely calling me unstable, likely assuming I would still be here when they returned. I looked around the office, the files I maintained, the systems I built, the schedules only I understood. They thought this building was their inheritance. They had never realized I was the one keeping it alive. That night my mother finally left a voicemail. Her voice was controlled, which meant furious. Elena, if you don't fix this immediately, don't expect things to go back to normal. I listened once, then deleted it, because for the first time in my life, normal sounded like a threat, and the next morning, Aurora Studios was calling at 9. I did not sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, because something inside me had finally awakened, and waking things rarely return quietly to sleep. At 6:10 a.m., I unlocked the gallery and let in the pale Charleston morning. Dust motes drifted through angled light. Somewhere in the back office, the old printer coughed itself alive. I moved through my usual routine, by instinct. Climate controls, security logs, front desk float, fresh water for the lilies in the entry arrangement, my mother insisted, made the place feel European. Then I stopped in front of the guest mirror, near the coat stand. I barely recognized the woman looking back. Same dark hair, same serious mouth, same posture, trained by years of apologizing for taking space. But there was something new behind the eyes. Permission. At 8:58, I closed the office door and opened my laptop. Julian Mercer appeared on screen. No small talk this time. Two others joined briefly, then muted themselves. Julian folded his hands. I'll be direct. My heartbeat climbed. We'd like to offer you a position at Aurora Studios. I forgot to breathe. Senior Visual Development Artist, he continued. Feature Division. Vancouver-based. The words sounded expensive and impossible. He kept speaking. Relocation assistance, visa sponsorship, signing bonus, health benefits, creative ownership clauses. A 6-month review with advancement pathway. I heard perhaps 60% of it. The rest dissolved into the roar of a life splitting open. Julian paused. Elena? Yes, I said too quickly. Sorry, I'm here. A hint of a smile touched his mouth. We understand this is sudden. No, I said softly. It's late. That made him look at me more carefully. We need an answer within 72 hours. I don't need 72 hours. One eyebrow lifted. I accept. The other two executives unmuted to congratulate me. Someone mentioned they were excited to see what I built. Built. Not managed, not supported, not cleaned up after. Built. When the call ended, I remained frozen in my chair. Then, without warning, I cried so hard I had to cover my mouth. Not graceful tears. Years of compressed grief, leaving through the eyes. I had spent most of my adult life trying to earn permission from people who had no intention of granting it. Meanwhile, strangers had just offered me a future. At 9:34, my father called again. I let it ring, then again, then Damien, then my mother, then all three in rotation. I answered none of them. At 10:02, an email arrived from Victor. Subject: Immediate action required. Elena. Arthur Langford has frozen negotiations pending clarification. You need to contact him and explain there was a misunderstanding. Your personal feelings are jeopardizing family assets. Call me now. Dad. Dad. Interesting choice. He used dad only when he wanted obedience disguised as intimacy. I typed one line. There was no misunderstanding. Then I closed the laptop. At 11, the front bell rang. A couple from Savannah wanted to view landscapes. I guided them through 3 rooms, discussed frame restoration, and sold a modest watercolor for $2,400. My family often forgot something essential. I was excellent at this job. I just no longer worshipped it. By noon, my mother had escalated to voicemail. Elena, enough drama. We are trying to enjoy a family vacation. I laughed aloud in the empty office. A family vacation, one I had been excluded from, so I could run the business sustaining it. You know your father's blood pressure rises under stress. There it was, the oldest trick in certain households. Make the oppressed responsible for the oppressor's discomfort. Delete. At 1:15, Damien finally texted privately. You've made your point. Fix this before you ruin your own future too. I stared at the message. My future. He still thought he was standing above me, handing warnings downward. I replied, you were living inside my future. That ends now. That afternoon, I began practical steps. I printed the Aurora offer. I reviewed relocation timelines. I checked passport validity. I contacted a lawyer recommended through an online artists' rights forum and scheduled a consultation. Not to sue, to protect authorship. To leave cleanly. At 3 p.m. I entered Gallery 2 again. Morning windows glowed under controlled light. Beautiful even after betrayal. I stood before the largest canvas and remembered painting it in my attic with frozen fingers because the heater had broken. Remembered my grandmother bringing soup upstairs without asking questions. Remembered believing effort would eventually be enough. I touched the frame gently. Then, I removed the entire series from display. One by one. Stored professionally. Logged carefully. No destruction. No tantrum. Just withdrawal of access pending verification. When my family returned digitally to social media at sunset, they posted from Santorini. White buildings, blue sea, Nora in oversized sunglasses, blessed beyond words. Comments flooded in. Goals, beautiful family, living the dream. I looked around the half-empty gallery wall and thought, dreams depend heavily on who is doing the labor off camera. At 6:40 p.m., another email arrived. This one from Arthur Langford. Elena, I've reviewed what you shared. Thank you for your professionalism. For the record, I withdrew because truth matters more than convenience. If you choose independent representation in the future, I would be interested in seeing your personal body of work. Regards, Arthur, personal body of work. No one in my family had ever used language that clean. I wrote back 2 sentences. Thank you, you will. That night I went home to my apartment and opened the old storage closet where I kept canvases stacked face to wall. Years of paintings no one had seen. Cities made of memory, women made of shadow and gold, interiors where no one waited anymore. I lined them across the floor. For the first time, they did not look like hidden things. They looked like inventory for another life. At 10:12 p.m., my phone rang again. Victor. I answered this time. Silence for one beat. Then his voice, lower than before. What do you want? It was almost funny. The man who had taken so much asking as though I were negotiating. I already got it. What does that mean? Long pause. You're emotional. No, unemployed. Another pause. Don't be dramatic, Elena. I start planning tomorrow. You can't just walk out on family. I looked around my small apartment, filled with unseen art. You taught me otherwise. Then I ended the call, and for the first time in my life, hearing silence afterward, felt like wealth.